Welcome to the Empire's preseason podcast series. Today we'll be talking about the Penn basketball team and our outlook for them this season. I'm Benjamin Simon.
And I'm William Derry.
Coach Steve Donahue returns for his third season at the helm of Penn, and this year stacks up to be his most talented roster yet. With a roster of 21 guys, Donahue's team is deep, young, and experienced all in one. The team will be led by big man A.J. Broder, who earned second-team All-Ivy honors as a freshman. He will be supported by a strong foundation that includes Antonio Woods, Ryan Betley, Darnell Foreman, and many other pieces. They will look to build off a season that led them to an appearance in the first ever Ivy League tournament. Now, Will, when we're looking at a guy like A.J. Broder, who's obviously the face of the Penn team right now and for the next 3 years, after such a good first year where he was, obviously regarded as one of the best players in the Ivy League, what improvements do you see him making this year that are just going to make him that much better?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said about him being the face of Penn for the next 3 years and how last season was an amazing year. He played great. He seemed to handle his own down on the boards. He wasn't overmatched by the college game, which for some freshmen can be a bit of a transition going from high school to college. But the run improvement I could see Broder making this year, it has to be his three-point shot. Last year, he shot really well for a big man. He shot about 40 or so percent from three, a little under 40%. And I think that last season, he wasn't hesitant when he shot the three, but it wasn't something he would automatically go to. He shot, he didn't average a three last year, but I think you could definitely see him averaging a three this year. And, he led the team in double-digit scoring games last year. He also was second on the team in steals with 27, assists with 54, and he had 4 double-doubles. And he just had a great freshman year. And for him this year, I think that physically he's ready to go. He proved that to us last year. I think this year it really is about him adding that three ball to his game and also, working with his front court mates and Max Rothschild on the defensive end and protecting the rim.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that the place where it's really going to take his game to the next level is, like you said, adding that three-point shot. Actually shot 42% from three last year, which, looking at it from the onset, is is a good number. But then you look at the fact that he only took 19 threes all year. He showed the ability to shoot the three where you have to guard him honestly or else he's going to shoot it. But you'd like to get it seem to the point where he's more comfortable taking that on a regular basis, on a regular game basis. You talked about him not attempting a three one game. He actually attempted 0.7, so less than 1 3 attempt per game. And I think that would bring it up to, his game to a whole new level. And we know he has a jump shot, and he proved that by his ability to hit some threes and his ability to hit the mid-range. And that also comes with just more experience in Coach Donahue's offense, and I think that would really help. You look at the good Cornell's teams, always had good shooting bigs, and that was obviously a focal point for Derry Nelson-Henry in his last year at Penn and his first year with Steve Donahue was. Donahue had mentioned that was something that he wanted out of Derry Nelson-Henry. While it wasn't something that Derry Nelson-Henry did a lot, that was something that he had wanted Nelson-Henry to add to his game. And that's something that he wants A.J. Broder to add to his game as well. The other thing is free throw shooting. I mean, if you're going to get to the line as much as A.J. Broder's going to get to the line, you got to shoot higher than 60% from the free throw line. I think that'll be a major key. And you're not going to bail people out by going to a free throw line and missing free throws. I think adding the jump shot with his ability to play in the paint would be really important. Not only for his game, but also his transition to maybe playing the forward, like you mentioned, and playing beside Max Rothschild.
And you bring up the point about him going to the line and hopefully knocking down his free throw shots this year. Broder played and started every game for Penn last year, so he's durable. He played 30.9 minutes per game, so he's someone who was able to play the entire season, started every game, and hopefully this season he can continue to stay healthy and knock down those free throw shots after taking the ball hard to the hole.
Yeah, the hope would also be that maybe he could play a little bit more in 30 minutes per game. Coach Donahue loves going with the big lineup, playing a lot of guys. I mean, you'd like to see A.J. Broder play a little bit more than 30 minutes per game. But it is what it is. And the other thing is that I think people often overlook by how good he is offensively is his ability to produce on the defensive end as well. Being as featured as he is, he averaged less than 3 fouls a game, which is obviously important for him staying on the floor and being productive, especially as their only big man last year. And then he averaged 2.5 blocks per game, which is not something that when you watch him play and you see him, it doesn't jump out. But he has sneaky athleticism, and he's just a good basketball player, a smart basketball player, and he knows how to play angles and things like that. It definitely shows in the offensive end. I think people don't always acknowledge his ability to, block shots on the defensive end, and it's a really big part of, it's going to be a really big part of his game this year, and he does a great job of protecting the basket. And this year he'll also have, he's going to have another big man paired up with him, probably Max Rothschild. Maybe we might even see a guy like Jared Simmons in there. I don't really think Mark Jackson, 7'3", freshman from Utah, is going to see many minutes this year. But, in that case, he might. And A.J. Broder will have someone else also. And that's a pretty scary, you don't want to go in that paint.
No, you don't want to go into that paint. And, to add on to all the things that Broder can do, you can't forget about his passing ability. He only averaged 1.9 assists, but having a center who can pass the ball from the post and find his teammates and set them up for open shots is something that you can't overlook. So I think that's another asset, another dimension he adds to the Quakers team. But as far as Broder and Rothschild being the two guys most likely to start for Coach Donahue, I think it'll be interesting to see how Rothschild does this year. He's not someone who scores a lot. That's not really his role on the Quakers, but he's a hard-nosed defender. He only had 7 block shots last year, but he's not gonna be the rim protector, but he's someone who's gonna battle against the other team's 5. He played 27 games last year, so he only missed 1 game. And like I said before, his stats don't jump off the page at you. He only had 3.8. He only averaged 3.8 points per game and 3 rebounds per game. His field goal percentage was actually pretty high at about almost 55%. So I think that it'll be interesting to see Rothschild in with Broder. And before I get your take on it, he was also named team captain, so he has the leadership quality. So I think that's also something to look for this season.
Yeah, knowing Max Rothschild and just seeing him around the team, fantastic leader. He's a really charismatic person and someone that you enjoy being around. He's very funny. Not a surprise that he's a captain. Not a surprise that you'll see him playing because he's a competitor, and that's something that's been really kind of part of this identity in recent years of Penn basketball. They just compete. Guys like Jackson Donahue, Max Rothschild, Matt Howard. They might not be the most vocal with a guy like Matt Howard, but Max Rothschild, they all are competing and they're all going to play their hearts out. And we've seen that last couple of years, and now they have the talent to go with that. It's a scary Penn team. And you mentioned, and I'm really happy you mentioned this, A.J. Broder's ability to pass. That's a really integral part of the Steve Donahue offense. The ability for big men who are playing with their back to the basket, to see that open man. And I remember Coach Donahue mentioned that when Darren Nelson-Henry, to bring him back up, mentioning when Darren Nelson-Henry was here and talking about how important his ability to pass was for the Quakers, and how even if it didn't always show up on a stat sheet, that he would get a lot of hockey assists, a lot of pass to the assist, and that was really important and really key to their offense. And A.J. Broder showed that last year, and he averaged 1.9 assists. We can round it up to 2. That's a fair amount of assists right there for a big man. I think that tells you a lot. He's a very complete player already as a freshman, and I think the only place that he can go is up. And I think people knew that he was going to be really good coming in. I didn't think they knew that he was going to be this good.
No, the one story I remember last year is about Steve Donahue recruiting Broder since since he's been in high school. So this is
Yeah.
a relationship that's been built over many years, and we're lucky enough as two people who follow Penn and cover their team. We're lucky enough to see the relationship flourish, and to see the outcome of the years that it took to build it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there could be a better way to say it. I think that was very well put. I think what'll be interesting to see is just, how the lineup shapes up, especially with all the guards that they have and all the players that they have. I mean, how is this team going to kind of mesh together, and how are they going to be able to distinguish themselves?
Yeah, before I tell you what my starting lineup is, I think we have to bring up Darnell Foreman, who had a breakout year last year. Darnell is going into his senior year. He is also one of the team captains, along with Max Rothschild and Matt McDonald. But last year, Darnell stepped up. He played in every game. He made 21 starts. He averaged 28.6 minutes per game. He was fourth on the team with 8.3 points per game. He shot about 70% from the free throw line, 40% from the field. I think the one thing that really impressed me last year was his assist to turnover ratio. That was at 2, and he was able to find open teammates. And I don't know if his junior year, started off the best, but towards the end, he was the guy who Donahue called. And we know from watching Penn in the past that Donahue is really adamant about playing guys who do really well in practice. And if Darnell was playing at that point in the season, he had to be playing well in practice. So I think that that shows his commitment to the program and to the development of his game. But I think I know you asked me for the prediction about the lineup, but I just wanted to make a point that Darnell's best quality may be his ability to create opportunities for his opponents, and to find open man either on a fast break or in the half court set. I just think that Darnell will most likely start the season as the point guard for Penn, and I'll run through the names first, and then we can discuss Darnell or whoever you want to. But at point guard, I see most likely Darnell Foreman. At shooting guard, or he may play forward, Ryan Bentley. And at small forward, I'm kind of up in the air. I think that when healthy and once he gets back into the rhythm of being back in college basketball after missing last season, Antonio Woods at the 3 or 2, I feel like him and Bentley can, change on that. Maybe you play Bentley at the 3, maybe you play Woods at the 2, or vice versa. And then, as we mentioned before, A.J. Broder at the 4 and Max Rothschild at the 5.
Yeah, I don't know if I see. I think that I agree with your lineup. I don't think you'll see much of Antonio Woods playing the 3 just because the size difference between him and Ryan Bentley. I think Ryan Bentley would probably see majority of the minutes at the 3, though he's probably more fit to play the 2. I think that Antonio Woods would probably play the 2. Well, I mean, I don't think he'd play the 3, and then unless they go with 3 point guards, which I think might be an interesting thing. If they went 3 point guards, I don't even know if I feel like it'd be 2A, 2B. Like none of them can really play the 3. But like if they went with like Devin Goodman, Darnell, and Antonio Woods, like how does that shape up? They just have so many good point guards, and I feel like they kind of have. If there's a position that they're weakest at, it's probably the 3 position. They have guys like, we'll get to him later, but Eddie Scott. Jackson Downey can't play 3. Tyler Hamilton, Sam Jones. They just have a plethora of point guards and 2 guards who I could see getting minutes on most teams in the country. I wonder if they'll go with that lineup with 3 point guards. Because they very well may be some of their best players on the team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Donahue does. I think we both know from watching Villanova over the years that 3 guards can work. In the past, I remember quite a few years ago when Jay Wright started Scotty Reynolds, Corey Fisher, and Corey Stokes. And, all three of those guys were guards. Corey Stokes, I believe, played the 3. Corey Fisher played the 2. And Scotty Riddles played the 1. So it can work in college basketball, playing 3 guards, having Foreman, Woods, and Bentley in the backcourt, and then having Rothschild and Broder at the 5. So it's possible to play with 3 guards. I think that, that could hurt them when they go against a legitimate 3, and then, he may tower over Bentley or Woods. But, if you want to play a more offensive lineup, I could see Woods or Bentley. But if you're going to play defensive, you could see Tyler Hamilton as a spot starter against a team with a taller 3. Or, I think one person who's been really impressive so far is Eddie Scott. I know that he's only a freshman, but we both know how often Donahue rotates the lineup, so I wouldn't be surprised. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Hamilton or Scott, or even, Jackson Donahue. I know Donahue won't play the 3, he'll play the 2. But at some point, as, frequent as the lineup changes, you'll probably see some of the guys make some spot starts.
Yeah, Eddie Scott's an interesting case because he's someone who, 6'6", very athletic, played at Gonzaga College High School, in the D.C. area, played Team Takeover AAU. Gonzaga College High School has really some really good players. Same with Team Takeover. He's played against really good competition, and he's someone who has stood out in practices. He's someone who is versatile, can play multiple different positions, has a nice jump shot, and is also very athletic. It'll be interesting to see how he fits in. And we know, unlike maybe some other players and some other coaches in the City Six, like Fran Dunphy, who kind of hesitant to play freshmen. Not the case with Coach Donahue. Coach Donahue plays who produces in practice, plays who produces in games, and he will not shy away from playing freshmen. We saw that last year with Goodman, Bentley, Broder, and I feel like I'm forgetting someone. Primarily those 3 guys who started at the end of the year. Oh, it was Darnell. But those 3 freshmen, started at the end of the year. And the year before that, Jackson Donahue, Jake Silpe, Tyler Hamilton were all getting minutes. He's not scared to play freshman. I think he won't be scared this year. Be interesting to see how he might play someone like Jared Simmons, who I think honestly could surprise some people. Put up some gaudy numbers in high school, and would average 19 points per game, 13 rebounds per game, and in the state in the playoffs he averaged 24 and 19 points, while in his region championship he scored 22 points and 23 rebounds. He also had a very good game in the red and blue game, scoring in double digits. So he's someone that, I think could make a run for money to get some minutes by the end of the year, and I think is flying under the radar right now. As a guy who can play back to the basket, he's bigger, he's a competitor, and I think he might be able to steal some minutes from Max Rothschild.
Yeah, especially with the front court being open and only having Broder and Rothschild, and since Rothschild is not much of a offensive threat, I think Simmons could be a complement to bring in place of Rothschild to give you that score at the 5, because he's 6'8", 250 pounds, and he was a captain in both football and basketball for his high school team, so he has the leadership qualities. He was named the WPIAL Player of the Year, and he's the first team WPIAL All-Section. So
he's definitely... Are you talking about Jared Simmons?
Jared Simmons, yes.
Okay.
Talk about Jared Simmons. Sorry, Jared Simmons was named WPIAL Player of the Year and a first team.
Yeah.
First team WPIAL All-Section. So he's an accomplished player, and like you said, he put up crazy numbers last year for his high school team during the playoffs. And they don't have the front court depth. That was one of the weaknesses I noticed when researching is the front court is pretty sparse. They have Broder, they have Rothschild, but after that, then it's up in the air. Of course, you have the 7-footer Mark Jackson, but I don't really think that this year is his year. I think that this is more of a development year for Mark Jackson after missing 2 years due to a Mormon mission. So I think that, one person that we haven't talked about and, in the past he hasn't really played much is senior forward Dan Dwyer. He only played 7 games last year. He's 6'8", 220 pounds. So I could definitely see Simmons playing, Dwyer, and junior center Kyle McManus, who's 6'10", 240 pounds. I see them more of in a reserve role, only on a case of emergency, or if they really are playing against a team with a large big man, or going ahead, or if Broder or Rothschild get into foul trouble. But bringing it all back around to Simmons, I think that he's someone that will see minutes this year and should be able to fit in seamlessly. He's similar height to Rothschild and Broder, so I think that he could fit in and be an offensive threat and also be solid on the defensive end as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Dan Dwyer. With Dan Dwyer, he's someone that always finds a way into the rotation, even when media members might question why is he getting minutes over so and so. Dan Dwyer has successfully found ways in the rotation almost every year. So, you might see him in there for sure. Wonder how someone like Sam Jones is going to fit in, because he's just had trouble kind of getting it going. He has a beautiful shot. He's 6'7". He's your ideal, either undersized 4 or bigger 3. Obviously has struggled on the defensive end and just really has never gotten going shooting the 3 ball, even though that's kind of like a staple of Steve Donahue's teams.
Yeah, Sam Jones, senior out of Gilbert, Arizona. He's been with the program for 4 seasons, 6'7", 185 pounds. And, his best year by far was his sophomore year when he averaged 8.4 points. He averaged 3.6 rebounds. And he shot about 33% from 3. Last year, he shot, close to 37% from 3, but he only made 24 three-pointers last year in comparison to shooting 58 three-pointers the season before. And even during his freshman year, he had 51 three-pointers. So the usage is just not there. He didn't see a lot of time last year. He only averaged 10.1 minutes per game. And I don't know, with Sam Jones, I think he kind of falls into that category where for him, I guess it has to come down to consistency. Since he's not someone you could really, he can play the 4, but then I feel like you're kind of giving up something on the defensive end. And do you give up, the defensive battle for the 3-pointer? Is that worth it? So I think with Sam Jones, he could factor into the mix this year. It is his senior year, his final season with the Quakers. So he's someone that, I think, could definitely come in and be a spark off the bench. If you need a 3-pointer, you need someone to, a hot shooter, I think you put him into the game. But I just don't know if he is consistent enough to, put him in and risk, what another team may do to him on the defensive end.
Yeah, I agree with you on all those points about Sam Jones. Someone who I think you might see if they decide to go small ball is guys like Eddie Scott, who we mentioned earlier, or a guy like Matt McDonald, who we have not mentioned yet. And Matt McDonald is a senior, is definitely the leader of the team. I mean, came in last year and was a captain, voted by his teammates. And then his sophomore season with Fairleigh Dickinson, he was a captain. Not very often that you see sophomore players captains at any school. And you look at Matt McDonald as a guy who maybe, and your hope would be if you bring him in to kind of fill the role Matt Howard filled defensively last year as an undersized 4-man with the size and competitiveness to play the 4 and to match up with the other man's 4 if you want to go small ball. He's 6'4", 220, has got up 15 pounds from when he was at Fairleigh Dickinson, which he was 185 at. His sophomore year, Fairleigh Dickinson, 185. He's now 200 now. He looks bulky. he brings the same attitude and you would think he brings the same kind of strength at this point in his career that would maybe help him go small. I'm trying to think of guys that would help them fit in small. Obviously, Tyler Hamilton's athleticism would fit in. Eddie Jones needs to gain some weight. That's very clear. But hopefully him in the future, he could fit that role. But if they decide to go small, I think Matt McDonald's someone that, with his competitiveness and his ability to kind of shoot, could provide mismatches for the other team's four, and he could also defend the other team's four, I think, better than anyone else on the team. Of the guards when they go small ball.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Eddie Scott and Matt McDonald can also fill that gap that Matt Howard left last year. I think it's a little soon to put the pressure on Scott because he's a freshman. We know that from his high school days that he can fit into a small ball lineup and create his own shot, get to the rim, and knock down a jumper. But I could definitely envision Matt McDonald being someone who could possibly score some baskets. With his size and experience and basketball IQ, I think that he could also be someone who could defend and be one of the first reserves off the bench for Coach Donahue and the Quakers this season.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of underwhelming last year in his role offensively, just because of the fact that he's played a lot of minutes and didn't put the ball in the basket a whole lot. And I think that'll be an improvement point. Eddie Scott is someone that I think it's going to be interesting to see how he factors in, because he's a Tyler Hamilton-like guy in terms of athleticism. I think he's more talented than Tyler Hamilton, though, already at this point. Will he bring the competitiveness that Tyler Hamilton would bring, and will he, get bigger? I think he might be an interesting guy at that small ball four. Maybe Sam Jones, but he's just so kind of not big that I don't know if he could fit in at that four spot at this level. And then it's the defensive thing. Could he cover a three? But can he cover a four? You'd love to have his 3-point ability on the floor, and I think that would mesh well with Broder's passing ability and his abilities, just to kind of bring the defense in. And I just don't know if that would work out. I think probably look more if they go small ball. Maybe Sam Jones, looking at more Matt McDonald, Eddie Scott, Tyler Hamilton.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tyler Hamilton is interesting. He didn't play in the red and blue scrimmage because of injury. He's trying to come back from that. But I think that he's someone who doesn't fill up the stat sheet, but he gave the Quakers pretty good minutes last year. He came in and was someone who could, make a electrifying dunk to, I guess, get everyone going. And I thought that he was, solid on the defensive end. I think he made an improvement from his freshman to sophomore year. So I think he's someone who could come in the small ball lineup. I think just like, I mentioned earlier, Donahue was willing to rotate the lineups quite frequently. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Hamilton subbed in at times throughout the year, giving one of the starters some time to rest. So, I could definitely see Hamilton factor into the lineup. But one person I'm surprised you haven't brought up is Antonio Woods. I know we talked about him a little bit, but, Antonio Woods missed last year after I'll let you tell the story.
Well, he missed last year and half a season before that due to an academic violation with the university. He wasn't even in school, and had to find a real job. And now he's coming back after a year and a half away from school. He was a commonplace at Penn games, actually. You would see him a lot of games. And it'll be interesting to see how he fits in, because when the time he got suspended, man, I remember like it was yesterday. It was right before the Princeton game. It was cold night, and Penn played Princeton super hard without Antonio Woods, had lost Tony Hicks earlier in the year, and they just battled Princeton all night. And you could see where, Jake Silpy played the whole game, played his heart out, but you could see just where they kind of missed Antonio Woods' sense of, calmness. And Antonio Woods always seems under control, and he was just a good basketball player, a good point guard, and it's going to be really important to have have that back. And his ability to shoot, his ability to just kind of operate out pick and roll. He's just a good basketball player, a high IQ guy. And I think he'll be able to pair with Darnell Foreman, but I just can't see him not playing because I think that Antonio Woods just has to play. I mean, he was one of the best point guards in the Ivy League by the time he got suspended. I don't know who will carry. I think that they could interchangeably carry the ball up. I think you'll see Darnell. I think they could also change depending on who they guard. Both of them are pretty solid. Darnell, I think, is probably a better perimeter defender, especially with his length. But Antonio Woods is obviously bigger at 195, and it'll be interesting to see how they match up on the defensive and offensive end and if they can kind of coexist.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Foreman and Woods, make it work, what they figure out as the season goes on and as Woods gets himself back into the swing of things. But, one thing that he did, one step that he did take was he participated in Penn's annual red and blue scrimmage. And, despite missing some time since, the Princeton game, before the Princeton game, he played well. I think one thing that'll be interesting to see is not only the connection he builds with Foreman, is just there's been 2 recruiting classes that have come into Penn since Woods last played. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something to look to. I know that the recruiting class that came in this year, everyone has to get used to them. But I think it's one thing to look for is seeing how he meshes with all the new recruits that are there. The backcourt is really crowded now with Donahue and with Bentley, and a name that we'll hopefully get to soon in this podcast is Devin Goodman. And, when Woods is right, he can be, very impactful. Before he missed the rest of that season, before he, got ruled ineligible, he was averaging 10.7 points per game, 2.2 rebounds per game, 3.3 assists. He was shooting almost 39% from the field. So, the one thing is when Woods is at his best, he can take over a game. He can, get the Quakers over the hump. I think he has, like you said, he's just a good basketball player. And, he can run Penn's offense. And, I think once he gets his feet under him, he gets back in the rhythm. He gets, close to where he was before his long time off. I think that, he can be back to the Antonio Woods that we all know he can be.
Yeah, you mentioned the crowded backcourt, which I think we should mention and talk a little bit in more specifics, especially with like the 1-2 guards specifically. Caleb Wood, Devin Goodman, Jake Silpe, Jelani Williams, and Jackson Donahue. I mean, that's a pretty long list of guys off the bench, and that's not even talking about our projected starters with Antonio Woods, Darnell Foreman, and Ryan Bentley. What if the 2-point guard thing doesn't work out? You move Ryan Bentley back to you might bring in another point guard to see if he can supplement Woods or Foreman if they don't coexist. But Caleb Wood's a guy who started last year. A lot of anticipation coming in after putting in big numbers at a community college. And he's a guy who can shoot and who can score, and just fell out of favor at the end of last year after the beginning of the year. And fell out of favor for a guy named Devin Goodman, who was the point guard, had won Interac MVP in his last year of high school playing for Germantown Academy. One of the quickest guys in the Ivy League right now. Unbelievably fast. He's also just really smart and a really good point guard. He knows how to handle the offense, and he handled the offense against experienced guards like that Princeton has last year in the Big Lights. And Donahue fell in love with his game and his ability to handle the offense, and I think we might see more of it out of him offensively this year. Jake Silpe's a guy who played a lot his freshman year, never really seemed like he ever got comfortable. He just never found a groove in either his freshman or sophomore year, although he played a lot his freshman year. Would turn the ball over a lot, could foul, get into foul trouble, just struggled shooting the ball, and he was a guy with a lot of anticipation on him coming from Cherry Hill close by, winning a state championship. And I think there was a lot of hope that he might, kind of be the next great Penn point guard, and has just struggled to get any minutes last year at the end of the year. I mean, barely played in the second half part of the season. And then the first part, and then his freshman year, just struggled to kind of get in a consistent groove. Although he played extremely hard on both ends of the floor, offensively just struggled to get in a groove. And then you got a guy like Jelani Williams, who's coming off an ACL tear in his final year in high school, after averaging 15 points per game. He didn't play in the red and blue game, but he's someone who I think could also, if he gets healthy, could throw a wrench into things. He's very talented. He's bigger than a lot of the point guards that they have on their roster. And, I mean, we'll see how he fits in. He might be a guy that you might see for a couple games here and there if he plays well in practice, or they might opt to kind of not play him as much and let him get healthy, let him figure out the offense, let him get comfortable. Might be someone that you might see in the next couple of years. And then Jackson Donahue, I think we'll see most of minutes at the 2, but be hard-pressed not to find Jackson Donahue some minutes. Just plays so hard and such a good shooter. Even though he struggled shooting the ball last year, I think he'll probably sneak minutes. I think he'll find minutes. He'll sneak his way in there. And I think he could surprise some people with his play, especially after how much he struggled last year. I don't think that's a good representation of Jackson Donahue's ability to shoot and his ability to compete and score.
Yeah, that is a crowded backcourt.
Mm-hmm.
They have,
Do you see anyone that might separate themselves as the year goes on?
I think it's hard. I think it comes down to situation. When you look at Caleb Wood, I see him as a veteran player who can come in and knock down a three. You mentioned last year he started a lot of games after coming in as a transfer, and I thought that he was going to be Penn's point guard for most of the season, but then he kind of fell off after Devin Goodman stepped up. And you mentioned Devin Goodman's good run towards the end of the year. He had a 3-game stretch during Ivy play where he scored in double figures 3 games in a row. He scored 13 points against Cornell, 14 points against Brown, 11 points against Yale, and this is in the heart of the Ivy League schedule. So he's another capable guard who did really well towards the tail end of the season last year. And then, like you were saying, Jelani Williams is someone who, the injury hurt him coming into this year because, he missed his senior year. So, coming back from an ACL injury is one of the toughest injuries to come back from in sports. So, like you were saying, probably, if he does really well in practice and, he trusts that knee. I think that's what, with him, that's really what it's going to come down to, is how much he trusts his knee and, gets back to playing basketball and feeling comfortable. He could, feature in a few games, but most likely we may not see too much of Jelani. And then Jackson Donahue, someone who can knock down the 3-ball, who, hit a big shot last year for Penn. With all those guys, I think the one out of the pack that could, I'll go with 2 guys that I think that could, maybe separate themselves is probably Devin Goodman because of his ability, his speed. I think, speed kills. And, to have a point guard who would come in off the bench and, run an up-tempo style of offense could be, invaluable for the Quakers. And then the other person is probably Jackson Donahue. You can never have enough shooting. We know he can hit the 3-ball. We know he can get a shot off. And he's proved before that he could hit clutch shots. He had a terrific freshman year, kind of fell off a little bit during his sophomore campaign. But I think Coach Donahue will call on Jackson sometimes this year to come in off the bench if maybe the starters haven't really, done well, haven't really shot the ball well early in the game. I could definitely see Jackson being someone that Coach Donahue would go to for a spark off the bench.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've talked a lot about the Penn backcourt. I think we should kind of switch gears a little bit here and let's talk a little bit about Penn's schedule. Will, how do you see the schedule kind of matching up? And do you see this is a tough schedule, not tough schedule, and how do you see them getting through it?
I wouldn't, say. I would say it's I don't know about. I wouldn't judge it based off of tough or not. They start the season with LaSalle. Well, they start the year against Fairfield at Fairfield on November 11th. But after that, in their second regular season game, they play against LaSalle on November 13th. And whenever LaSalle and Penn play against each other, it's always something to look forward to. And I know you mentioned earlier in the podcast about Broder possibly going up against B.J. Johnson. So that's something that, we can look forward to on the 13th. And I think that's a early game to look forward to. And then on November 20th, they go to the Gulf Coast Showcase in Florida. They play Northern Illinois on November 20th. And then once that game has been completed, they either play Florida Atlantic or Townsend on the 21st. And, once that Gulf Coast Showcase is over, they go on the road to West Long Beach, New Jersey to face Monmouth, who is, a lot of people know them because of their bench celebrations. They've been featured on ESPN a lot.
Wait, they also went 27-7 last year and almost made the tournament.
I know. But what I remember them is for their bench celebrations and how they would be on ESPN. I'm not saying that they didn't win a lot of games.
I know. I remember them too. Honestly, actually, I forgot about that, but now I do remember them.
That's what I remember about Monmouth. They play a good Monmouth squad.
Well, Penn's gonna have to step up their game in that area then.
Yeah, they play a good Monmouth squad on November 25th before traveling against crosstown rival and fellow City 6 team, Villanova. They play at Villanova. So they have a tough schedule just in the month of November. They play, I'll ask you, what do you think about the second, after they play Monmouth and Villanova, I see they have a big game on December 9th against Dayton.
Yeah, Dayton's going to be a tough team for Penn to play with. Although Dayton graduates some of their best players, Penn, Dayton has been to Dayton's been to the NCAA tournament for the past 4 years. There's someone that is going to give. They're ultimately going to give Penn some trouble. It's going to be a tough game for them to obviously come away with, but it'll be interesting to see how they compete with a team of that caliber. And it'll be interesting to see if they can compete with a team of that caliber, because this team definitely has the talent to do so. It'd just be interesting to see, if they can put it together by that point, and if an Ivy League team can compete with a team like Dayton, even if they lost their head coach Archie Miller, even if they lost some of their best players. I just think of it as a good measuring stick for Penn, and definitely one of the more challenging games they've had. Honestly, outside of the City 6, up there with Miami they played. This is one of the most challenging games they've had in the last couple of years.
And then following that Dayton game on December 9th, they start Ivy League play on January 5th. They play against rival Princeton.
Oh, wow. Me, you say it all the time. Never been to a better college basketball game than a good Princeton-Penn game.
I agree. Those games they're memorable. Oh, my goodness. The atmosphere at the Palestra when they play against Princeton is like no other. Last year, unfortunately, they lost in overtime in the Ivy League tournament, but January 5th is going to be a great game. It's going to be, the student section will be filled. They'll have the bands from both schools. All the alumni will be out, so that's sure to be a good game.
Yeah, it's an interesting. That's about the time. Then would be 2 years ago that Antonio Woods had gotten suspended. That obviously would be a meaningful game for him and for the team. Just felt like in that game when in the press conference, Steve Donahue started crying when asked about Antonio Woods, and after such a competitive game with Princeton, you're not getting tears out of Steve Donahue unless it's Princeton, and that's just how important this rivalry is. And this game's gonna be so good, especially with how good Penn is, especially with the way their games last couple of years have gone, just how close they've been and how hard Penn has played, and how close they've came.
And following that game, on January 12th, they play against Donahue's former team, Cornell. So whenever Cornell faces Penn, especially now that Donahue is the head coach of Penn, it's always a good game. So I'm looking forward to that one. And, towards the end of the schedule, they play against Temple on January 20th. That's a Big Five battle. So that'll also, and it's at the Palestra, so you can't ask for a better matchup location than the Palestra. Temple Penn, that's sure to be a good game as well. And then on the 27th, following that Temple game, they play against St. Joseph's. And St. Joseph's squad is good this year. Last year, St. Joe's struggled with injuries. They just had some unfortunate injuries from the beginning of the season to the end. But this year, they're back and healthy, and I'm sure Martelli and Donahue will come ready to battle that night.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about is a prediction for Penn. Last year they made a great run towards the end of the season, finishing fourth in the Ivy League, and making it to the first ever Ivy League tournament at the Palestra. They are picked fourth in the Ivy League again this year in the preseason Ivy League media poll. They're picked fourth this year to finish. So, Ben, what do you think? What is your prediction this year for Penn?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they match up this year. My prediction is that, and I say this in the report, that they'll go 18-12, 5-8 in the Ivy League. Definitely an improvement from last year. Obviously going to be some bumps on the road. Just with so many guys, it's just hard to kind of find. It's going to take some time to find that cohesion. And also the Ivy League's very good, and they're playing a tough non-conference schedule against some really good teams. And they have a tough stretch on the road. You talked about that after the Gulf Coast, the Gulf Coast tournament and on. They have 5 road games right after the Gulf Coast Showcase. And, the Gulf Coast Showcase is also in Florida. So it's, 8 games of on the road. It's going to be a while since they come home. And it's just, that's not an easy stretch. And they just have a tough schedule. I think this Penn team is really talented, and they're young and talented. I think 18-12 is a good barometer. I think it's a safe barometer.
Yeah, I agree. I could see them winning, 15 to 18 games last year. They finished 13-15 overall last year, and they went 6-8 in conference. I could see them winning a few more conference games this year. And, I agree. I think the schedule is tough. They go on the long 5-game road trip after the early season tournament. So, yeah, I could see them, that being one of the tougher parts of the season. But like I said, they just have so much depth this year. They have so many talented guards, and, it'll be interesting to see how they put it all together.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have anything else to add outside of that? I don't think I have anything else to add.
Yeah, I would just add that, it's going to be, like I mentioned previously, it'll be interesting to see how Donahue puts it all together and, to see who steps up this year. I know last year, the freshmen, Devin Goodman, Ryan Bentley, and A.J. Broder, they all came in as freshmen, and they impacted the team. So I think it'll be interesting to see if one of the freshmen will step up, or one of the guys who is already on the team, that was on the team last year, will have a breakout season. You never know with the Quakers which player will light it up at a certain time.
Yeah, that's for sure, especially with Coach Donahue's willingness to switch up the lineup and give people opportunity. But thank you for listening to our season preview of Penn. Really appreciate you tuning in to the podcast. We'll be releasing a written report and a podcast to accompany every season preview that we do about all the City 6 teams. We'll give you ample opportunity and ample coverage for the teams, give you varying opinions and various ways of consuming the content that we're giving out to you. But thank you very much for listening to our edition of Penn season preview for the 2017-18 season. I'm Benjamin Simon.
And I'm William Derry.
Thank you very much.